Okay, so I started doing this little scribble maps thing to keep track, of stories I see throughout the week and put them on a scribble maps and put these cool little icons on them. Some of them are meant to be a little humorous. I got a taco down here. Uh, Generally focusing on global geopolitics as it relates to maybe the paradigm shift from unipolarism to multipolarism, or as it relates to the United States, but not United States centered in so to speak. I don't know if that makes any sense. Who cares? Uh, there is something going on today in the United States, though, that is interesting. We had so first of all, we finally had a vote passed through the House with broad support for funding for the next 45 days, which doesn't include any Ukraine funding. So they finally gave in at the 11th hour, which is to be expected. A lot of people thought it was certain that we'd be having a shutdown, but haven't we always had this situation, or most of the time, where we at the 11th hour we've had them finally put through a bill? This is how it always is. So I don't understand why people are still falling for the narrative that there will be a shutdown. The stakes are too high for that to happen, and the outcome is too uncertain. The Republicans wouldn't have known. Are we going to get blamed for it? The Ukraine, the rah rah Ukraine weirdos were not sure if they would get blamed for it because they were holding out for Ukraine money. So it's pretty typical, but people still fall for the same fear mongering, and that'll be forever, I suppose. But even better than the fact that they did this is this is my Twitter, by the way. We had, and I got this map every week. I'm going to put the map. So my Twitter is at bimbo4990499. And this is my anarchist flag, and I put random flags of countries I like. That's the flag of Niger. That's a flag of Gabon. They just had a military coup, although I don't think their military coup was about. I don't know what that one was about so much. But we have Representative Jamal Bowman, who I recall is a big Ukraine supporter, and apparently he pulled the fire alarm during the proceedings of the vote. Okay, where was I? So apparently he was rushing. So he says that, according to this article, which is on ABC News, here's the title. He says that he was rushing to get to the House floor and he pulled the alarm. It's really disjointed. I think he was just throwing out excuses. He thought that it would open the door. Then he says first he says Bowman said that he thought the alarm, which is red and says fire in capital letters, would open the door he typically uses to get from his office building to the Capitol for votes. And then here it says, I was rushing to make a vote, Bowman said, and I didn't know it would trigger the whole building. Think about that for a second. That's quite a statement. Uh, a fire alarm not trigger the whole building. I have yet to see a fire alarm that does not trigger the whole building. Unless it's maybe the Pentagon, I don't know. I have never seen that. So I think the Pentagon, from what I remember when I was there, it was so big that it would seem to me possibly that you would have sort of compartmentalized fire alarms. But I would think most buildings, if you pull the fire alarm, it's going to trigger the whole building. So this just goes to show you what absolute idiots these people are. I think he was one of the people. I know AOC did it, and I think it was Jamal Bowman that did it also, or one of these Democrats that made a mistake on the three branches of government, which is really, really pathetic and shows how far this country has fallen. And let's not forget, as far as I remember, Jamal Bowman is very adamantly in support of Ukraine. He's probably making some money on the grift somewhere, somehow, or has a lot of, backers that are defense contractors. So this is really pathetic. And, we'll see what happens. He'll be treated with kid gloves. My tweet was. What was my tweet? Yeah. Oh, politicians deserve a break and special treatment. They aren't the smartest of people. So, how could he possibly know that pulling the fire alarm would trigger the whole building and disrupt the proceedings in the House chambers? I mean, what fire alarm does that? So this is, and then his other excuse was he thought it was a lever to open the door. Even ABC News has to make fun of him. I mean, I don't care if anything bad happens to this guy. I could give a fuck, about what happens in DC at this point. Eventually, DC will sink back into the bog from whence it came. It will be irrelevant eventually when this country naturally goes through the decentralization process, and then DC will still be there, but no one will care. I've been to countries where that was the case, where the capital city, there was a capital city and there was a national government, but you go all the way to the other side of the country and it's like they're just doing their own thing. There's no federal offices. There's nothing. I believe that'll happen to the United States eventually once, the fiscal crisis really kicks in. I digress. So that's funny. That just happened today. This bill is going to go to. I was hoping that the government would be shut down. I was really hoping. I mean, it would have been great. I'd love to see entitled government workers not get paid. Here's the other thing. It's like these people are so entitled, these government workers, and they'll say, "Oh, how could you say you want the government to be shut down? Oh my God, they won't get paid." And most of them actually will, for at least a couple paychecks. So it's whatever. But it's like, oh, they won't get paid. No, the poor government workers that live in McMansions and, Fairfax and then Columbia, Maryland. Oh, poor government workers. I don't see ever government workers express concern when people in the private sector get fucked over one way or the other, lose their jobs. I never see that. These people are so entitled. And that's what happens to civil servants in any system is they become entitled, spoiled little brats. And usually they become parasites. And then they take, they take the rest of the country down with them, is basically what happens. So, but what I wanted to get into is we're going to do a little roundup of the weekly stories I saw I found interesting. And the first one I wanted to go to, because this was the first one I actually put on here back maybe Monday, if it comes up. Here we go. So here we have an interesting situation. So here in Afghanistan, we have the Taliban. Basically, what they say. Here's the article. No, that's this article. Let's take that article out of here. We have this article here. The Taliban are creating a large-scale camera surveillance network for Afghan cities that would involve repurposing a plan crafted by the Americans before their 2021 pullout, an Interior Ministry spokesman told Reuters, as authorities seek to supplement thousands of cameras already across the Kabul capital. So, they're fighting the Islamic State, which, people were saying back in centuries ago in 2021 that, if the Taliban take over, the Islamic State is going to come in. Okay, guys, newsflash: the Taliban don't like the Islamic State. Uh, I mean, they understand that the Islamic State has connections to U.S. intelligence, Saudi intelligence, and Pakistani intelligence, whoever. So why would MI6 for sure? So why would they want IS? Why would they want Islamic State in their country? They wouldn't. The Taliban won. I admire the Taliban. The Taliban, first of all, they're hella fighters, and they want to create, and they have enough of a consensus to create an a conservative Islamic State, basically Pashtun run, in Afghanistan, and they got the consensus for it, and they were doing good with managing certain aspects. They got rid of after the United States left, opium was eradicated in a few months. That's not something that was advertised too much in the news. So I have no problem with the Taliban. I think the Taliban are awesome. Anybody who kicks the U.S. government's ass, I think, is awesome. And what I found interesting about this article, though, is in this article somewhere, they go into the U.S. State Department here. So they got a comment from the U.S. State Department. And here we have the U.S. State Department said Washington was not partnering with the Taliban and has made clear that to the Taliban that is their responsibility to ensure they give no safe haven to terrorists. So the reporter went to the State Department and they had the conversation, and the State Department spokesman said, "Hey, write this in your article. Say that the United States is not partnering." So that's a very specific word. Why would they say partnering? It's in quotes all by itself here. Okay? Because they are working with the Taliban, obviously, but they wanted to use the word partnering to suggest we're not really working closely with the Taliban. We're not partnering with the Taliban. We are maybe, talking to them a little bit. So what this really kind of signaled to me is that the United States is indeed talking to the Taliban. And the reason they're talking to the Taliban is they want to counter China in Afghanistan. Afghanistan has always, throughout history, been a strategically important country, whether you were the Mongols, whether you were the Chinese, whether you were Alexander the Great, maybe not so much, but it's been strategically important throughout history at different times. So what this signaled to me is that the United States is indeed working with the Taliban. The State Department spokesman, being a weasel that he is, that they all are, said, "Hey, I don't want to just outright lie right now, so I'm going to say just tell them we're not partnering, okay?" And then they'll assume, then the audience will assume we're not working with them at all, right? But in fact we are, but we're not working really closely. So that gets me to the other article that I put on this icon, which was, and I didn't do I guess I didn't put the Wayback Machine link to this. But basically what this one says is this kind of confirms what I was saying. I did a little research after that. And the U.S. is working with the Taliban. They're holding on to the funds. Now, if you remember, right after the ouster of the United States froze all of the assets that were supposed to go to the Afghan government, once we left, our hand-picked Afghan government. We froze those assets. And the Taliban were complaining about it, and they were like, look, that's our money. And it probably is mostly their money. They might have actually earned a big portion of that money. But they said, that's our money, that's our, reserves. It was in a U.S. bank, of course. So the United States said, was salty about what happened because politicians and government bureaucrats are nothing if not vindictive. Uh, I don't think just read your history, folks. Uh, and so what's going on right now is the United States is doing these audits of the Taliban regime. And if they're satisfied with what the Taliban, the basic, uh, activities of the Taliban, then they will release the money. And that's important to the Taliban. The Taliban need that money. And again, this is going to be going back to what they're going to do is they're going to hold that money in front of the Taliban and say, you're not getting this until we're sure that you're not going to let China in and turn this into a Chinese military hub or whatever. It's probably something like that. I'm sure India would be concerned about that as well. So that's my take on that story. So we had a suicide bombing in Pakistan, in this area of Pakistan, on the Afghan border, of course. Killed like 57 people. No one's claimed responsibility for it yet. Of course, the news is saying ISIS because they always do that, but they're not claiming responsibility for it. No one has claimed responsibility for it. Here we have a nice NIMBY hypocrisy, NIMBY meaning not in my backyard kind of hypocrisy story, where you have all these European shipping companies, okay, and what they're doing is they're basically bringing all of these ships to this beach in this area of Bangladesh. And what they're doing is, they're leaving these to be scrapped in Bangladesh. And so this is very dangerous work. A lot of people are dying scrapping these ships. It's very bad for the environment. And yeah, the Europeans are basically dumping all these old ships, all these old barges there. So just, yet another case of hypocrisy from Europeans, and again, NIMBYism, and so much for green and so much for human rights and so much for anything. As long as it's not in my backyard, it doesn't matter. So here's a story, Al Jazeera, European companies dumping toxic ships on Bangladesh's beaches. And it goes into, it's a decent, it goes into some detail. A lot of these ships, I remember, have asbestos. I read every one of these articles that I put on here. A lot of these ships have asbestos on it. It's really just not cool that you're going to drop these ships off here and let the Bangladeshis, if you're going to talk all this virtue signaling nonsense, then this would be contradictory to that. Let's just say that. So that is that story. We'll just fly through these because I have a lot of them. And what I'm doing is I'm just putting stories that I find interesting or that I find important. So the next one is, this started early last week. There was a dispute over this shoal out here. This is like a shoal. And this is a place where a lot of Filipinos like to fish and, whatever. And the Chinese put up these sort of waterborne barricades out here. And then the Filipinos came out and basically removed them. Was it the National Guard that removed them? Let's see. We condemned the installation of the floating barriers, the placement of the barriers. Philippine Coast Guard and Fisheries Bureau personnel discovered the floating barrier. Okay, that was the day before it happened. Then I think they did it the next day. China refutes the accusations. Uh, okay, so the barrier, I believe, was eventually removed. Fact check me on that. And then China says, "Oh, we're gonna do military exercise." Well, so then this story comes out. Now I don't know if the military exercises are related to some fishermen, the Coast Guard at the behest of fishermen removing barriers. But China issues warning for military exercises in parts of the South. So we hear about this all the time. So Al Jazeera is kind of, being typical hack journalism. Although Al Jazeera is in the mid range for hackism or hackery, but this is typical. They're connecting they're connecting the military exercises to them removing a floating barrier from the that shoal. So who knows if that's the case? But that basically, typical saber rattling. Now, the Philippines has a lot of military bases on it, and it's doing. I don't know about a lot of military bases, but it has some military bases, and it's doing a lot of business with the United States and weapons deals and all that. So basically, what the Philippines is doing is kind of, in my opinion, perhaps a mistake, which is partnering with the United States. We see how that works out. Look at Ukraine. I'm just saying. I don't know if it's a good idea, but then we have this story, which I found interesting. This one comes from Zero Edge. Smartmatic voting machine company implicated in $4 million slush fund bribery scheme using fake contracts. So basically, the gist of the story is, from what I remember, is that Smartmatic bribed a local election official, and this is in the court document. Smartmatic is named as a co-conspirator. They bribed a local election official in the Philippines so that, they would install their machines, I guess, or something like that. Typical stuff. All of the nonsense about, these companies are perfect and they're not corrupt. This flies in the face of that. So, would you trust a company that does bribery routinely? Maybe not routinely, but gets caught doing it. So they got caught engaging in bribery. Would you trust that company to be the company that fulfills an important function of counting votes for an election? Would you do that? I don't know. There's no reason why we can't just do paper ballots and count ballots. No reason. It's never been a problem before. Or count the ballots and put them in a machine to have a copy of it. You can use the machines, but there's no reason we can't count the ballots. It's just no reason. With all the money we spend on so much useless shit, we could spend just a little fraction of that and have there wouldn't be any questions about elections ever. But neither the Republicans nor the Democrats want to actually get on top of that, because both sides actually benefit from election fraud. Where are we going next? Let's go back. Here we have a quick one, a little quickie down here. Solomon Islands, they're making friends with China. I've heard about this before. This comes out of Global Times. They use their typical language. Basically, Global Times is a Chinese government-run paper, okay, news site. And here they talk about, well, this is going to be great. We're going to do all this economic development, blah, 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 blah. And I didn't put this story on here. I think I did, but then I deleted it by accident. But a bunch of Pacific Islands leaders went to Washington, D.C. and they basically were Biden, kissing up to Biden, and Biden was kissing up to them, and they were complaining about climate change. And Biden says, we're going to do something about climate change, which means he's going to enact some dumbass policy that is going to do nothing for climate change, but it is going to be annoying. And then, tit for tat, quid pro quo. We know where that goes. So we got here in Korea, first of all, this young man, the man that defected to North Korea. This is an interesting one. So he defected to North Korea, and here now the full story comes out. What's his name again? Travis King. Travis King defects to North Korea. He says he cries racism. Racism, racism. I want to go to North Korea where there's no racism. I mean, is that really the case? Do you know that for a fact? Just because North Korea is communist, I mean, communists typically are at least on the surface anti-racist. But this is a closed society. I mean, you think they're not going to be judgmental to you? You're the only black man in the entire, one of the few black men in the entire country. So he's going to go to North Korea. Well, the truth comes out. He got in trouble. He got into a bar. It's in here somewhere. Don't want to misquote it, but he got into a fight. Basically, he's going back to the United States. It seemed like a pretty severe charge, which means he probably is getting he's probably getting kicked out of the military, and he's going back to the United States, and he's probably going to go to jail. So that's why he actually defected to North Korea. What's interesting about this story is the North Koreans only held him in detention for like a couple weeks, and they said, "Get this guy out of here." It's like, we don't need this guy here. He's useless to us. So they gave him back within 2 weeks. So I found that funny. Next one. This is interesting. So I find this really interesting. The opposition leader in South Korea, he's been under threat of arrest. They've been going after him. And it looks to me a lot like what they're doing to Trump, just not so deranged and not so. It's like they didn't charge this guy with like 20 charges. It's not so blatantly obvious with them, but they charged the North Korea guy with a crime. This guy, probably can't pronounce his name anyway, so I don't know why I'm looking at it. They charged this guy with a crime, and a judge, I believe, what was this? A couple days ago, denied the arrest warrant. So he's probably still charged, but there's no arrest. They didn't arrest him. He actually went on hunger strike. He did do a hunger strike. That's why he's wearing a cane in this. He did like a 24-day hunger strike to protest the prosecution, the attempted prosecution. I'm not sure how the South Korean legal system works. I know enough about the United States legal system. But he's wearing a cane because he went on a hunger strike for 24 days, and he had doctors, and the doctors said, you can't go another day on hunger strike. You're an old man. It's like this could fuck you up. So he had to quit the hunger strike. But yeah, this is pretty interesting, kind of like a lawfare situation going on in South Korea. And, being that South Korea is like, an important United States ally, it doesn't surprise me that, South Korea is taking after the United States a little bit and doing dumb shit like, filing charges against opposition party leaders. It doesn't surprise me, a little bit of that influence of the United States coming into play. Next one is this one. We're in Japan, which actually the markets in Japan, are they open yet? Let's go to Yahoo Finance. So in Japan, basically, the yen is is collapsing. It's not doing well, and the central bank people or someone over there had stated that, when the yen gets to 150 yen per dollar, we're going to have to do something because, we're going to have to, stop printing money and stop, doing our quantitative easing, or else, the inflation, then we're concerned about inflation at that point. So they set this red line, and we can already be past it by now. I don't even know. But because I think I keep yen, dollar, yen here. So this was as of, does it say the time on here? This is last week, so we haven't opened up in Asia yet. So this is kind of interesting. So the reason this is important is a lot of reasons, but Japan is very important to the global economy. The Japanese banking system is very closely tied to the U.S. banking system. They do all things like the yen carry trade and all that. Uh, if they allow the yen carry trade results in the Japanese banks and other financial institutions borrowing a ton. I mean, buying a ton, or is it no? They're lending. Okay, so they're borrowing a ton of money, and because the central bank in Japan is doing such aggressive quantitative easing, the Japanese banks can borrow money basically for free, and then they take that money and they buy U.S. Government bonds, and they make the money on the spread, and that's one thing that happens. And just the Japanese, and so if they stop printing money to keep the yen from falling and collapsing, well, that means the interest rates are going to go up, and then those banks are all going to blow up, and they know it. So they have a choice to make: let the interest rates go up, or slowly boil the population with inflation. Now, it's been inflation in Japan has been a rarity over the past. It hasn't been very common in Japan over the past couple decades. I think a lot of that might have to do with Japanese culture, but also maybe their relationship with China, their trade relationship. But lately, inflation has been starting to rear its ugly head in Japan. And this is due to a variety of factors as well. But the printing of the money is one of those reasons. So this is going to be closely watched. We'll probably have, maybe overnight, we'll see something happen. Now, we know that Japan and the United States, the central bankers, are also very closely knit. And like I said, that is because not only are the banking systems closely knit, but Japan buys a lot of treasuries. For example, they invest in a lot of pension funds in the United States. So there's a lot going on there. Japan is very important. So this is one to watch. This can have huge ramifications. Japan has huge ramifications on the United States economic system. Basically because Japan is a vassal of the United States, and so we have used Japan, and Japan has benefited from. We have that relationship, a close relationship, but one in which Japan is a subservient vassal, but still both sides have more or less benefited from it. That's actually being a little bit too simplistic with it, but at this point, both financial systems kind of need each other. So we've done the Asia Pacific. We got an election in the Maldives today, and we have something going on. It might be already decided by now. The opposition candidate is projected to win, and he's friendly to China. He wants to have a closer relationship with China. So we all know the United States government probably doesn't like that. India probably doesn't like that. So he's going to win. Maldives are pretty irrelevant otherwise. I mean, they're a vacation spot. But other than that, who cares? We have a nice article from Gray Zone talking about how Amnesty International, which is a corrupt, captured organization, completely captured by the foreign ministries and the State Department and by the intel agencies, they're complaining about human rights abuses. And Gray Zone, as usual, does a very detailed, very good article about how basically, you know, they're just making up shit because they don't like the Eritrean government, is what it comes down to. There's no evidence. They're just using anonymous sources. It's more bullshit. Amnesty International is pretty much discredited at this point. So I don't know why anybody would listen to him. Human Rights Watch probably also captured, but seems to be a little bit less hackish than uh, Amnesty International. I mean, the boomers probably still worship Amnesty International, but the boomers, who gives a fuck what they think? Amnesty International, they're kind of useless. Kenya, this is a good one. So apparently Lloyd Austin went to Kenya. Now Kenya's been having some economic problems lately, right? So Lloyd Austin goes to Kenya, meets with Secretary of Defense, and they do a deal. And he probably met with President Ruto as well. I think his name is Ruto, which he's kind of like a popular figure in African politics. Kind of a little bit of a firebrand. So, nice looking guy, good politician, talks very nice. And occasionally he says stuff that is kind of flies in the face of the establishment, which people want to, this is what Africans want to see in their political leaders at this point. And I think a lot of political leaders in Africa are starting to catch on to this. You saw it with the president of the Congo as well, talking shit to the Europeans. The Africans love that. So who knows if they're sincere or not, the politicians, but the populations usually love when they talk shit to the Europeans. The Europeans deserve to get talk shit to. So anyway, this is interesting. So they did some deal, but what is really interesting about this is apparently there was a tenuous agreement for Kenya to send 1,000 peacekeeping troops to Haiti. That's right, Haiti. And it's just, this came out of nowhere, and people are like, why is Kenya sending troops to Haiti? Is it just because they're African, they're black, and Haitians are black? Is that the train of thought here? I mean, the issue is, Kenyans speak English and Swahili. Haitians speak French and Creole. Kenyans are Muslim majority, and Haitians are Christian majority. Their cultures just don't match. And it's like bigotry here. Isn't that racist to assume that, we're just going to send African troops there to Haiti and the Haitians will love it because they're black too? Is that really what the train of thought here? I mean, I think it's a little bit deeper than that. It's probably because, Kenya was one of the few countries that would agree to do this sort of thing. I'm sure that's part of it. I mean, no, and as far as the language barrier, yeah, most Haitians can understand French, but really what they speak is Haitian Creole, which is not mutually intelligible with French. I guess you can get the point across, but it's not really the same language. So anyway, very interesting. I just found this one funny. Congo, we have the usual suspects complaining. I guess it's the Carter Foundation, and they're saying that this president is he's not fair to the voters or something. And this is one of these guys in Africa who occasionally talks shit to the Europeans. And he actually, another story is he's asking the UN peacekeepers, who they may have been there since I was there. I mean, like 25 years ago, 20 years ago. I mean, these UN peacekeepers have been here for a long time. They're worthless. And they want the UN peacekeepers out. And then Carter administration is this European election watchdog. Like, who gives you the right to watch elections? Oh, it's, France and Sweden. This is a non-independent election watchdog. Give me a break. So they're coming in and they're saying, oh, there's an election in December, and this president and these people, they're not being fair, and there's intimidation and blah, 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 blah. No one cares what you think. So leave the Congolese alone. What's really happening is there is a war for Africa, kind of a Cold War for Africa going on. There's a lot of stuff going on where Russia and China are getting in there, and they're making friends, and the United States doesn't want that, and the Europeans don't want that. And right now, it seems like the United States and Europeans are losing this war, and the Chinese and the Russians are winning. And so we're going to start hearing more and more about Africa and weird shit going on in Africa. I'll be the one to let you know what's going on. But this has to do with this sort of rush for Africa, really, the second rush for Africa. And this time, I think the Africans have the agency to choose who they want to partner with. And so now you're going to see the United States starting to kiss up more. You're going to see the Europeans. If they ever get over themselves and stop being arrogant pricks, the Europeans will start kissing up too. I mean, I think that the United States personally is very happy that France got kicked out of Niger, for example. I'm sure they're not opposed to that. So the United States, once again, in Congo is a very important country. It is one of the if not the largest, one of the largest countries in Africa, as you can see. And it is a rich country in resources. And hopefully the African politicians do the right thing for their people. And hopefully the people hold them accountable. And so the Africans can get the best deal and become the powerhouse that they're meant to be. And I firmly believe that. So here we have British Airlines pilot got coked up in Johannesburg and drunk and coked up in Johannesburg, and he had a flight the next day. He had to fly British Airways, and he looked like a younger guy, maybe a 30-ish sort of guy. 27 September. This guy, a lot of these pilots are young, I noticed. There's a lot of young pilots out there. So apparently he got all fucking gaitored out and drunk and had sex all night. Good for him. But he did the thing you should never do, which is he told a female acquaintance what happened. And the thing is, you got to understand, men, you got to understand, never tell a female something that you don't want, your mother to know, for example. Just a little point of advice. I just had to put that out there. So here we go. Next one. I'm actually having fun with this one. This video. Oh geez. Okay, we have. What are you doing? Okay, we already looked at that. So next one is there is a strike. Basically, two of the biggest unions in Nigeria are about to strike. So this goes to why, I kind of had a feeling about this from the beginning. These whole threats about Nigeria leading some armed response to the Niger coup. It was kind of far-fetched because Nigeria has too many problems of its own. And here we go with sort of stuff that's happening. Here's the croissant, signifying that the French are, as many people probably heard, are about to withdraw from Niger, so they're finally getting kicked out. The military and the ambassador Macron looks like the bitch that he is. Then we had a coup signifying a coup that was attempted according to the Burkina Faso, the Burkinan stallion himself. There goes the Burkinan stallion. All the women love him, and he wears like really nice Nike BDUs, and he knows how to put on a persona. He looks like a linebacker, and the Burkinian I don't know. I'm trying to make Burkinan stallion. Here he is, and he said that there was a coup. And here in the article, which is France 24, I guess it was some military people. We're gonna do a coup. Who knows how legitimate or serious of a coup it was, but he said there was an attempted coup, and that guy right there, he is not having it. So there goes Burkina Faso. Maybe he just wants to stay relevant. This guy, maybe he just wants to stay relevant, so they just made some shit up. Who knows? Who knows? He has to be loving the limelight. He dresses the part. We have the United States is salty because Egypt doesn't want to arm Ukraine. So the United States is salty about Egypt not arming Ukraine. And there's some more articles out there about, oh, the president of Egypt, he's not fair, human rights abuses, all the normal shit. So, whenever you see that, always understand that there's an ulterior motive. And what it really is that Egypt doesn't want to arm Ukraine for the United States. That's what it is. So, and always go to like Wayback Machine if you get this stupid crap like this. But, and then we have something interesting. So there's this warlord in eastern Libya who met with Putin and a few other people. So I guess eastern Libya is kind of autonomous. And the rest of Libya, obviously, it's backed by the United States and Europe. And from what I gather, anybody that goes into the part of Libya where the United States controls it is closely monitored, and they can't take pictures or do anything that the Libyan intelligence, which is really like the United States is running it, and NATO is running Ukraine. And they are draconian about what can be said. There's no free speech. There's no nothing there. It is a complete police state. And so you still have elements of, that's from what I've heard, okay? So this is just what I've heard. Take it with a grain of salt. But you got this guy, and he's still, I guess, resisting a little bit. And he's meeting with Putin. So that's going to be, again, the plot thickens in the war for Africa, and this can get interesting. Okay, close that. Where else are we at here? We have a election today in Slovakia again. A party. I think this one's a closer election here. So pro-Russian XPM versus pro-Western liberals. This, for a country that's as small as Slovakia, a quick side story. I had a friend that lives in Slovakia. Well, a friend of a friend who is from Slovakia. And she said she went to Western Ukraine several months ago, and she talked about it. She said all the young men were hiding. And I think she was somewhere in Western Ukraine in this area. And who knows, maybe one of these towns right here, like Muchevko and all that. And, she said that all the young men were hiding. They were afraid to come out because the press gangs. So I heard. They're having so this could have outsized implications because this is for the size of the country. Because this is going to be maybe a pro-Russian government being formed, if a government can be formed at all. We'll see. We had last Sunday weird the incident in Kosovo where some, I guess, allegedly Serbian type of rebels, nationalists, whatever, were fighting the police, and they hold themselves up in a monastery, and kind of, I don't know about held the people in the monastery hostage, but the people in the monastery had to hide, and you know they hold themselves up in the monastery so the police just wouldn't, like, just shoot everybody in the monastery, right? So they used it seems to me they kind of used the people that were in the monastery as kind of human shields. Typical behavior, right? Germany, my country, continuing to fall apart because they're bitches and can't stand up to the United States. As far as I'm concerned, they can go fuck themselves. They're a disgrace. Western sanctions on Russian diamonds set to disrupt global industry. So apparently, this is they're trying to convince the Belgium diamond market, which is based out of Antwerp, which I think I got it marked correctly. So Antwerp is like the traditional diamond hub of the world. Although India is also a big diamond hub. And the United States is trying to convince these people not to buy Russian rough diamonds. So, I mean, it's not going to make or break Russia. It seems to me like, kind of a vindictive move. I don't know how this isn't going to hurt Russia, just like none of the other sanctions have really hurt Russia, at least not very much, maybe a little bit. Long story, a little short story. I was talking to this fucking boomer at the gym. And I told him at the beginning of this, I said, I think my explanation was, you have the largest commodities producer in the world. You're not going to win an economic war if you are a debt-driven consumer, like consumerist economy. Unless you get the entire world to do it, you're not going to win an economic war. You're not going to be able to sanction Russia into submission. It is one of the largest commodities producers in the world. There's always going to be somebody that wants their products. And he got so salty. He never talked to me again. But that's one less boomer I have to deal with. So next one is Sweden PM summons army police. So apparently there's a lot of gang violence in Sweden. Now, Sweden, for the past 10 years, has been kind of like, in the news here and there. They took in a lot of refugees, and there's been some problems, no-go zones. I think Tim Pool did a good documentary on that years and years ago. And now there's this gang violence. Apparently, they're getting a hold of guns. I thought gun control was supposed to, what happened to gun control, right? Gun control doesn't work because they're still blowing each other away in Sweden. And it's getting to be a problem. It's even in like small towns. They get a hold of a lot of grenades over there. And I remember there's a reason for that. Like there's some way that grenades became readily available in Sweden. So they get a lot of grenades. And, for all the gun control they do, it doesn't stop the gun violence. So now, the PM of Sweden is apparently getting the army involved, and I don't know if that means martial law or what, but I just want to laugh at them anyway, because these Europeans. I remember when the last time I went back to my home country of Germany, and there was this young European. He was very intelligent, spoke very nice English. He was probably Austrian or something. And he's like, "Oh, why do you like guns?" And he was just so snooty about it. And it's like, "Ha ha ha! You think you need guns for to fight against the government? Ha ha ha! They have F-16s. Ha ha ha!" It's like so snooty, so arrogant. So let the arrogant Europeans, learn about whether gun control works and other things. I mean, I could care less. But he was a good dude, but he was just really arrogant about, like guns. Oh my God, you guys are weird. You guys are just stupid because you guys want guns. It's like, motherfucker, like, let me have a gun. Let me have his guns. What's your fucking. Okay. And, during COVID, I bet a lot of Europeans, when they were locked down, worse than China, by the way, Europe had worse lockdowns than China. China actually had relatively mild lockdowns. Europe was locked down by far worse than China. And I bet some of them were wishing they had guns then, you know? So, fuck the Europeans. Okay, we're moving on. Uh, what else is there? Let's do a little Latin America, and then this will be over. We got just a story about in light of boss man Malay looking like he's going to win the election. Then you see these stories coming out about how people are absolutely getting crushed in Argentina by the horrible economic policies that have been going on for a while. And I stand with Milei, Javier Milei. We'll see what he does. I don't like his stance on abortion, though. The guy, he proclaims to be a libertarian. I don't know if you're a libertarian, and I used to call myself a libertarian, but they're too dogmatic. I like being an anarchist better. They're just too dogmatic. But if you're gonna call yourself a libertarian, then you're gonna say abortion is illegal. That just doesn't sit right with me. Okay, I'm just saying, look. Let the people do what they want. That's what the whole fucking shit about libertarianism is. And we don't need to get into these fucking debates about when the heartbeat is a conception and all this, and you're a murderer and you're not a murderer. I mean, we don't need to get into all this. But other than that, Javier Milei is the man, and hopefully he's successful. He's going to get elected. And what's amazing about Argentina is this libertarian movement is a youth movement. The kids are tired of what their fucking boomer parents did to the country, and they're going to go the opposite way and elect a libertarian. And I, for one, hope it works out great, because we need a good libertarian leader in the world, and just show the world how it's done. And don't worry if fucking Obrador calls you a fascist, because that's what Obrador did. Obrador is like, oh, he's a fascist. It's like, fuck you, Obrador. Go worry about Mexico. Let Milei handle business down in Argentina. So this story, now that I'm done with my rant, talks about, just how bad the situation is there. Poverty went up something like 40% in a year. It's like really fucked up situation. So that's fantastic. Malay will be good. Now, here we have a story of another country I'm closely connected to, that I have a connection to, is Colombia. Colombia. And the president, this is funny. So the president Petro, who is kind of like, I didn't have much faith in this guy. He sounded too much like a bullshitter. There were a lot of Colombians and Latin America people that were like, oh my God, he's great. He's a socialist and this and that and the other. And I'm like, dude, he sounds like he sounds like a WEF type of person, talking about green this, green that, I didn't buy into him. So I don't know. I haven't followed Colombian politics enough to really know what's going on. But, Colombia is an American colony at this point. It's been really infiltrated pretty deeply by America. That starts with Bush and Uribe, and the United States, really getting involved in the Civil War there in the early 2000s, and basically, Colombia kind of becomes the Israel of Latin America. People say that all the time. And Petro, came in and. I guess he thought he's going to he's going to thread the needle between being sovereign, keeping Colombia sovereign, and being the America's bitch. And I don't know so far. I haven't heard much about him, honestly. But what's interesting about this is that we had Zelensky's PR people in Ukraine, edit a video of Zelensky in the UN. And while Zelensky's talking on the video, then the it switches to the crowd, but it's not the crowd that was at Zelensky's speech. It was the crowd at Biden's speech because there was nobody watching Zelensky's speech. So, and it was so bad because during the video that they released in Ukraine for the Ukrainian population, Zelensky is in the audience watching himself talk. It was pretty hilarious. Well, this guy did something similar. His office, his PR people put together a video, and again, used a video where there were a lot more people in the audience, listening than him, than actually were for his speech. So they used maybe one of Biden's speech or Lavrov's speech or whatever. Lavrov's speech was fantastic, by the way. Lavrov laid it all out. He said, you know what? We're not going to do peace with you guys because you guys always lie. Lavrov was like, listen, you guys lied every time we try to do a peace agreement with you. We will decide this on the battlefield. Beast. Or based. Beast is the old 90s term for cool. Based. And Petro did the same thing, so I found that interesting. That's why he got the clown. Maybe I'll rip off of Alex Cristofaro and do a clown world one. This is the clown world one. I wonder if he'll be upset with that. Nicaragua. You like that? Nicaragua. So the U.S. So this is an interesting one. So the United States imposes visa restrictions on some people in Nicaragua. And then you got this former politician of Nicaragua who used to be the United States little do-boy. He's in exile. He's upset. And the CIA is upset because this is like a loss for them. The Sandinistas are now in power in Nicaragua. And they went through all that shit in the 70s and 80s, Iran-Contra, their little stupid secret war. And what ended up happening? The Sandinistas eventually came to power anyway. So the CIA failed because they don't know how to fight a war, by the way, because they're bullshitters. And bullshitters, you can't bullshit your way through a war. I keep trying to tell some of these spooks that they don't want to hear it because they're arrogant as fuck. But anyway, the United States is doing the usual shit. Oh, we're going to sanction people. So this is one article talking about that. And it gets into the guy, this is Reuters, obviously. So this is MI6 writing this, basically. But, use your brain when you read this stuff. And here they're talking about, they committed serious and systemic violations, which amount to crimes against humanity. Let's see what they're see if that links to something useful. Well, I'm not doing that right now. To me, it looks like the United States is salty because Nicaragua eventually, after a horrible civil war imposed on it by the United States, Nicaragua now has self-determination. The United States is salty about that. So, what else is new? Next one, Guatemala. We have a guy who won the president, who's the president-elect, apparently. They're blocked. Okay, so hold on. Resignation of prosecute. So they're trying to prosecute the president-elect of Guatemala. So the United States isn't the only banana republic. I mean, Guatemala really is the original, or one of the original banana republics. Maybe it was Honduras. But they're going after the guy after he already got elected. And you got the Guatemalans. They're not happy. They're gonna do their thing. More power to them. Fight the fucking power. I'm not the don't do. You'll never see me do BLM. We'll do this. Okay, that's a real. This is what the real worker's fist looks like. The real worker's fist looks like it's coming to your face. That's how real workers show their fist, right? Like the Okinawan Kempo fist. Okay, not this little gay shit. Look at. Look, what is this? No, that's a fist. That is a fist right there. So anyway, uh, great stuff. Go workers. Go. Look, to all my socialists out there, I don't consider myself like a diehard communist, but I'm with you on any union worker shit where I'm down. Let's fucking fuck shit up. Let's do it. Then we have the taco signifying there was just some cartel battle going on in southern Mexico in the Chiapas district, which is interesting because Chiapas was a place where there was a very important leftist sort of grassroots movement that kind of helped bring about the whole pink revolution and the bolivars and all that. So look into that when you get a chance. But yeah, that's interesting. Or Obrador is blowing it off, saying this is just a minor issue, and it probably is. But I guess the whole town got closed off because of the battle between the Federales and the I think which town was it? I think I accidentally moved this. Somewhere down here, one of these towns like just got closed off basically. Uh, that's some rough terrain down there, isn't it? So yeah, now this one is more interesting. There is a trade war going on between, well, I wouldn't call it a trade war, but there's a trade dispute going on between Mexico and the United States. So these are some articles. They were all Al Jazeera, I guess, because they hyperlink to each other. So yeah, they're saying no, we're not going to let the United States flood Mexico with your crappy fucking genetically modified corn. Basically, the Mexicans are saying we got corn covered. Corn is our thing, and we want you to keep. And they're feeding they're using it for animal feed, but they're saying no, we don't want your crappy corn. We got the corn thing covered. We know corn. And we want to protect our small farmers. And Mexico actually, going back to the Chiapas rebellion, has sort of this tradition of grassroots farming movements where, they're protecting the small farmers. And, small farming is kind of something that they take pride in. And I think it's great. So the Mexicans are having a trade dispute of sorts. This, I think, is... it's going to some independent commission, and they're going to make their decision. And at the end of the day, Mexico can either agree to it or not. And so we might hear about this in the future. Corn is an important crop in the United States. The United States, of course, sees Mexico as a I wouldn't say a vassal, because Mexico's actually been relatively, compared to a lot of countries in the world, compared to most European countries, Mexico's maintained a fair bit of their independence. I mean, they've been fighting the United States since the 1800s. I mean, mid-1800s, even earlier than that. So the Mexicans, they can deal with the United States, but it's going to be interesting to see the drama that ensues from this situation. We'll probably be hearing more about it, because corn is very important to the United States. They want to sell corn, and we're very arrogant, so we're probably going to say, how dare you not take our crappy genetically modified corn? That's what we would say until we try some of their corn, I'm sure. And then we have the last story. Canadian Parliament gives standing ovation to Mecha Hitler for role in fighting Russia. That's a Babylon Bee story. So there's a Mecha Hitler. I still laugh at that. There goes Mecha Hitler. There goes no. So there goes Babylon Bee. Okay, so that's the weekly news roundup, and I'm just gonna maybe continue on with this. We'll see if I can maintain it. I got a little obsessed with this at first in the beginning of the week, so I put a lot of time into it. We'll see if I can. I may not have as many stories next week. We'll see if I can maybe be more efficient in how I do it as well. But I had fun with it, and I think that's it. I think in closing, in closing, is there anything I could say in closing? In closing, I say, God bless Vladimir Putin. I'm out.